Hello, I've had some people ask about, one, the wet palette that I use, or a palette. I don't know if they know it was a wet palette, but anyway, it is. As you might know, if you're one of the new people into this, you might not, but a palette is something you put paint on to thin it out, mix it, whatever. You can use CDs. This came from a CD thing, not sure what it is. You can use anything you don't mind getting paint on. Some companies make little, it'll be something like this, but with little wells in it. Those are good to have. I used one of those for a while, and not sure what happened to it, but I like this much better. This is wet palette. The idea behind the wet palette is you have a way to store your paints mid-progress. So if you need to, you're having a painting session, then you need to go make dinner, doorbell rings, whatever, and you're gone for an extended period of time. All you have to do is, mine's a bit broken, close it up, and the paints will stay good for quite a while. I've had paints last a good week in here. After a certain amount of time, they kind of do dry a bit, so you go to mix them back up, you get little chunks in the paint, and that's not good. The anatomy of this wet palette, at least, let's soak up this glaze I'm not using anymore. For any wet palette, you want something with a lid or a container that closes, typically plastic, because that holds moisture pretty well. A common and fairly easy thing to get your hands on for a wet palette is just some Tupperware that you don't mind sacrificing for paint. After that, I guess I should explain what this is. This was found at a solar cell lab when I was at university, and it was holding busted solar cells, so I took the busted solar cells and this. Very handy. Works pretty well. I don't have that much of a painting surface, and if you get a Tupperware thing, it could be as long as this, and maybe even wider. Next up in the case, I guess we'll remove that bit, is some paper towel. This is just paper towel that I've cut to fit the case. You can fold it over, but unless you can get the folds just right and they match the size of your container, then you might just have to cut it. Scissors work great. You only need 4 layers of a thin paper towel, maybe 1 or 2 of a really thicker kind. I'd go with 2 of the thicker and then 4 of the thin. You can see that it's wet, and the general rule of thumb for figuring out how much water you need is if you push down water pools. You can kind of see it. You can add more than you need, but you don't want the water to creep up over your actual painting surface, which for wet palettes is parchment paper. I think it's called butcher's paper in the UK. Anyway, this sheet's already wet. It's been cut to size with scissors. And when you put a fresh sheet on, it won't quite play nice, as I've had this problem. We'll show here my other pre-cuts. Put it on, and it curls. And it won't curl if it's been soaking, but it can't soak if the parchment won't stay flat. So, water pots, paint pots, I should say, not water pots. Like so. Keep that there for 5 minutes, it'll stay flat. Yep, that's pretty much my wet palette and wet palettes in general. A very handy tool to have. I do not regret giving up the little thing with wells, just because I can like go to class, make dinner, lunch, meals, things like that, or even go on a road trip and not have to worry about paints and mixes, things and stuff drying up. And another thing, if you try and paint on, I guess if I try to paint over here without this water, put the paint on and it'll dry fairly quickly. Not so here. Like this gold, that is dry. Anyway, that was a bad example. But depending on how thin you thin your paints, depends on how long they'll last. I mean, they last tremendous amounts of time if you thin them out on here. I think that's all that needs to be said about the wet palette. I recommend you make one. Fantastic tool in your arsenal to have.